call this Citizens Budget Review Advisory Committee meeting to order at 6 p.m. on Monday, June the 5th. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let's have a roll call, please.
Mr. Herlihy?
Here.
Mr. Slavin is excused. Mr. Napier?
Here.
Mr. Frank?
Here.
Mr. Mota?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Ms. Flaherty is excused. Ms. Ring?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you for the roll call. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of February 21st.
Move approval of the minutes from February 21st.
Is there a second?
There's a second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Would like to welcome our two new alternate members. One has an excused absence, and Andrea Ring is here. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
Review of the second quarter report. Mr. Kilgore, Administrative Services Director.
Thank you.
Take it away.
This is a report for the second quarter ending March 31st of 2017. I've given you basically the packet that I would forward on to the City Council, and covering, it includes a cover sheet and an actual resolution to amend the budget for the changes. We detail out the changes in Exhibit A. The biggest items I would point out to you is we adjusted our books for the accounting on the septic to sewer grant. There was a $100,000 grant that was added to the funds that we had allocated, so we adjusted the books for that. Another big one was the football field restrooms. There was an appropriation made for that back on March 8th by the City Council. The council also determined to set a maximum on the equipment and facilities renewal and replacement reserve. They set a limit of $275,000. We had $94,000 more than that, so we made an adjustment to reduce that on the books. The additional changes we're asking for council to now approve include a number of smaller items from the renewal and replacement account, and also a rather large expenditure to replace one of the police air conditioning units. So that's kind of the highlights of that page. Feel free to interrupt me if you have a question. The executive summary part where we show the graphics, in general, the general fund's revenues are 57% received through March 31st, and expenditures from all departments totaled 47% of what had been allocated. So for this time of the year, of course, we receive some of the ad valorem, or most of the ad valorem taxes, and that's why our revenues will be higher. Expenditures look good at 47% out of the 50% point that we would be at the end of March. In looking at the general fund graphs, the revenues are shown. You can see that the revenues were slightly higher than revenues at this point last year, and expenditures were quite a bit less than they were at this point last year. And that's a lot to do with the voluntary early retirement program that we incurred in the early quarters of the previous year. The two graphs at the bottom I would just point out that the revenues from our major sources of revenue, other than ad valorem taxes, include the electric franchise, the electric utility taxes, and the half-cent sales tax. So they are just very slightly above what they were last year. We haven't seen a lot of growth in those three main sources of income to general fund this year, but I don't see it as a problem, but I just wanted to point out we're not seeing a huge increase in those basically utility type revenues and half-cent sales tax revenues. The department spending, administrative services is higher than the 50% level because basically we paid for the audit cost, which is a big part of our account. And in the police department, we make a lump sum payment for the pension contribution for the year. We do that before the end of December, so at the first 6-month period of the year, their expenditures are on the high side, but I expect that to correct itself probably by this next quarter. So I don't see any difficulties in the general fund budget for this year. On the next page, we go into the special revenue funds. Once again, I'd point out on the graph in the upper left-hand side that revenues from local option gas taxes, the discretionary sales tax, and even stormwater fees are very flat, or we're not seeing any kind of additional revenues over and above what we budgeted. If you kind of see the two blue blocks, the light blue is the budget amount, the dark blue is the amount we've received, or we anticipate receiving this year based on what we received the first 6 months. We comply with all our debt service requirements. We did make the final payment on the discretionary sales tax bank note that helped finance this facility and the police station. That was made first day of April, so it's not shown in these numbers, but that debt is now behind us. Getting down to the golf course, the revenues versus expenditures through March 31st are showing $132,000 addition to the reserves. But remember that the golf season, the heavy months are just before the end of the calendar year. So I don't expect that to last. And if you're aware of what's going on at the golf course, we are working on the green, so we're down to only 9 holes. So play is very limited, so we're going to be seeing that for the rest of this fiscal year, or up until September, I think, when they're supposed to be completed. The following page is graphs on the airport and the building. In both cases, they are adding to the reserves for the first 6 months' activity. The balance of the report, shows you all the more detail about the individual funds and the major accounts and by category. Flipping over to the capital project status report, we made a few changes to that this quarter in the format, trying to show you the source of the fund, so you can see the budget sources that it comes from. And then in thousands of dollars, we break out the actual amounts from each source. So that should help when you're trying to look at it and say, well, if we didn't do this project, would we have monies available that we could reallocate to the purpose of that fund? So I hope that helps you. One big thing I would point down, about halfway down on fiscal year 2017, we have the Hurricane Matthew expenses. You can see a negative $579,000. These are our items that we charged during the hurricane for both labor and, I'm sorry, this is not labor, but it would be repairs to facilities and basically what we use to report to FEMA for our reimbursement, but it does not count yet the amount to be spent on the docks And the dock work is under progress, and that's what's going to be coming out of our reserve funds to pay those bills, and then hopefully get the reimbursement from FEMA. We do have notice from FEMA that they've got in process $565,000 that has passed the first review by the people that help us write up the paperwork, but it's just pending the new funding agreement, which is typical, that we have yet to get that agreement and get that executed on our behalf. But checks in the mail, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make, for a good part of that will cover these costs. As far as the status of cash reserves on the following page, you see that we have, actually at the end of March, our renewal and repair and replacement reserve is down to $221,644. I've given you a heads up that there's like 4 other pending items that happened after March 31st. So really at this point in time, we have about 174 remaining in the R&R fund. When you take that off of our total reserves, there's another $5,279,000 that's yet to be reduced, that will still be reduced by when we pay out the dock work. And I forget what those bids were, or what the total sum was, but it's like well over $1 million. Final comment I wanted to make is on the next page, the investment report. We continue to have monies in Seacoast Bank, the State Board of Administration, and $500,000 on deposit with Florida Trust. Through June 2nd, Florida Trust is now showing a profit on that $500,000, which I was glad to see, because I think I reported before that they had initially gone in the hole based on the timing that we entered into their program. I would like to open it up for questions then.
Does any member have any questions of Ken on the second quarter review? Any? Nope, I think we're good. Oh.
Okay, Ken, as usual. I'll go. Couple of questions. And I have no specific order here, okay. The 579 for the hurricane that you're showing under capital, that's capital expenditures, or that's also labor included in there?
Labor is not included, but it does include like when we replace the soffit or... Labor is not included. It includes things like when we did repairs, some of the minor damage that we had to some of the roofs.
Yeah.
Okay. It includes the...
Is that the debris pickup also in there?
No, this does not include the debris.
Okay. This is stuff that...
I'm sorry, the biggest part of it is the debris. I misspoke.
Okay, and FEMA will reimburse us for that. That's what's in that initial
part of the packet that
565 request.
we hope they
or
will
whatever.
pay for us.
Okay, that's
Yes.
fine. Okay, so we're moving along.
And we did get from our insurance company, there was only like $29,000 that we were eligible to claim, and we did receive a check for that. But the problem is they have a deductible established by facility. So like it has to be related to this building, and they take the value that we've got insured for this building, multiply it by 3%, and if our claim is not over the 3%, then we get no reimbursement. So there were only a couple of facilities where we had enough cost at that particular facility to exceed that facility's deductible.
Is there insurance on the dock?
No. There's total exclusions, and we're going to look at, I'm waiting for the construction of the docks, and I do intend to get some quotes on what the premium would be to cover the docks in the future.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to the next question. All Aboard Florida, a few years ago, we funded that. I see it's up there, changes authorized by the city manager. There's like 99,000. I think there was 2 years, it got a $50,000 funding. Is that 100,000 just sitting out there in?
Actually, I think it shows on your capital project report as well.
Yeah, it's on the summary of budget changes.
Well, it appears there because we were making sure it was accounted for and everything,
I mean,
but
what have we done with that? Or is it just out there for consideration to be reallocated?
what we think we're going to apply some of that to is there's work being done this month, I think, by the railroad that we're responsible for, and that's said to be like $102,000 or $103,000 of work.
Oh, that's a great answer right there. Don't go any further. That's cool. Let me go on to your charts. Do I read you correctly on the second page where you're showing the special revenues? It looks like the DST revenue is lower year over year. Is that an accurate read on that graph
No, let me
on the left-hand side?
explain. If you look at there's 4 bars for each source of revenue.
Right.
The pinkish bar is the amount we received the prior year in the first 6 months.
Yeah.
Second bar is how much we received this fiscal year in the first 6 months. So you can kind of see
Second bar looks shorter to me.
a little bit shorter than the first 6 months of last year.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It looks like we received less revenue from the DST.
Well, we received, all it means really is we received more in the first 6 months
Last year.
last year.
So that's not an indictment that
Not necessarily.
consumers are spending less and we're getting less?
No, but what I do in part of my routine in preparing this report, then I take the current year total budget, which is the light blue, and I compare that to looking what we received the first 6 months of this year,
Yeah, okay.
adding basically, putting it simply,
Keeping it
then I
sti-
add what we received the last 6 months of last year to this year
Okay,
to get how much I kind of anticipate then receiving, which will still be better than budget.
okay.
Not by a lot, but the
Okay.
real beauty is they did renew the DST, and we've got that source of revenue now.
On the last one, under the building fund, on the last, on the right-hand graph for under the building,
Yes.
did revenues from last year, for some reason, seem incredibly higher?
We did have a very good year last year.
So we peaked on building revenues. We're saying maybe 2016 was the peak on revenues and that we should not expect building revenues to continue at that level?
I mean, we've got a good amount of building revenues
Oh, yeah, it's positive for
in
the
this
year,
year,
but
in this year
it's
as well.
not going to
but
be
it's
like,
not going. Last year was definitely the high point, or the banner year.
yeah, okay.
And my understanding, last year's revenue represents permits that were paid, and we're very busy this year because those permits, you need the inspection activity and so forth, so it's falling into, it's keeping the department very busy, but it's not as revenue rich as it was last year.
Okay, one more question. Okay, so city council has capped the, help me again, Equipment and Facilities Repair
R&R.
Fund, yeah.
We refer
At
to it as the R&R.
275. Just so I understand how this works, that means at the end of this year, if that fund is down to 100 and a quarter, and we have a surplus, we will fund that back to 275.
Only up to 275.
But if the surplus is only like 25 or 50,000, then
We'll try to live with
then
what
the
the remainder
facilities
is.
equipment only goes up whatever the surplus is. It doesn't, we're not going to slide money from the general reserve over to cap it at 275, or would we do that?
No. No, we'd only replenish it up to the 275.
Whatever the surplus allows.
But if there is not a surplus, nothing is added.
Okay, we're not gonna slide money out of the general
No.
reserve.
Not
Okay.
according to the way the resolution read. Our fallback is basically we go to the council and say,
Yeah,
we need to rethink this and we need to put some more money in the R&R. I mean, that's the fallback. I mean, it takes just a few air conditioners to really throw off our numbers.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Ken, on the building permit, the building department, I'm guessing that one of the reasons for last year being high was that Pelican Landing, that huge building up on Route 1, the assisted living. I mean, that's got to be an outstanding number in the building department, and I think it hit last year.
The permitting hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that may account for why it was so high last year. However, they're not anywhere near as big. We've got two buildings being built right now on corner of Jackson and Route 1. They're not as large and they're not as fancy, but it's revenue, building permit revenue. And obviously,
I think there was a lot more housing activity in the prior year as well.
I thought reading through the document where everybody lists what they did for the quarter, they said it was the same as last year. Something like, I'm doing this off the top of my head, something like 26. Anyway, it sure seems as though it's busy, though. And they're building all around me again. Okay, question. I'm just double checking. On the 2017 capital expenditures, proposed expenditures, we've got 750,000 for paving and roughly 283 for reconstruction. So that's that's $1,033,033 if you add those two numbers together.
Okay.
So we are going to do that. That's what's in the budget.
Well, you can see where the 750 shows
Yep.
that encumbrance amount should be pretty close to what the actual bill paid was. We've already completed all that work.
No, this is 2017. This is the new budget.
This is 2017 is the year that we are in.
Okay, all right, excuse me.
It's the fiscal year ending 2017.
All right.
Not quite clear there.
But so we're going to end up spending $1,033,033. Or
Yes.
close to it.
I believe it's already
All right, I want to double
been
check
paid.
that. If there've been any, well, we'll get into it later about what the thoughts are for next year.
Yes.
Okay, and I think that was my one question. I'm done.
Andrea? Sergio? Harry?
I have no questions.
Public input. Does anybody from the public wish to speak? Please come forward, sir. Give us your name and address.
Yes, sir. My name's Michael Marsh, P.O. Box 691061, Vero Beach. Thank you very much for allowing me this chance to speak. If I'm correct, I believe this is the beginning phases of the budget for here in Sebastian. I just want to bring one topic to your attention, and hopefully this will carry on to City Council where I will present to them as well. The young man that's on my shirt was a childhood friend. His name was Corey Jones. He was shot and killed in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. What has that got to do here in Sebastian? Well, my crusade for body cams started back in October 2015. Now, I can't tell you that your Sebastian Police Department has so many problems that we need body cams. Matter of fact, I can tell you that you have a chief that's very transparent, and as an activist and advocate, I can truly appreciate that. But what I would say is, Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, never thought there would be the venue of what the tragedy took place with Corey Jones. That officer has since been arrested and now is facing a life felony. But on that day, we had no idea. All we had was the officer's perspective of what took place on that tragic morning. Fortunate enough for my friend, there was a phone call that everything played out. My point is, these body cams are essential. This is emerging technology that we needed yesterday throughout our police departments, throughout our sheriff's office. Now, I can't tell you that Sebastian is part of the $1.4 million that has been paid out in excessive force or civil rights violations. The sheriff's office has paid out that amount. Vero Beach, North Fellsmere have those same problems. However, it takes one lawsuit, just one lawsuit, to get right in that $1.4 million ballpark of what has been paid out by Norfolk County Sheriff's Office. My point is, this is not just transparency that we, the community, would expect from law enforcement. This also helps our men and women that protect and serve us day in and day out. Because what if, God forbid, one of them is in a police-involved shooting? Would they want to go through if for some reason they get indicted? This footage, this body cam, can also save them and save each of these municipalities that go to them. Lastly, I will tell you the cons, because I've heard it from so many chiefs as well as sheriffs. It's expensive. I say this is not an expense. This is an asset, back from my accounting degree. And why I say that is, you can lease these body cams. An agency such as small Sebastian Police Department, I think, would kind of mirror Palm Beach Gardens. They chose to buy them. It's about a $300,000 expense. I would lease them because, as you know, technology today will be obsolete in a month. Also, the redactions. Well, what if an officer goes into a school, to a hospital? We have Florida state statutes in place for that. We don't have to recreate the wheel. The statute is very specific. We have to redact police reports. The video footage would be no difference. So in closing, I would ask that you look at this emerging technology and that we outfit, just as there are tasers, there are firearms, these body cams need to also be a part of their regular uniforms day in and day out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That, of course, would be up to the chief to request, I'm assuming, and we've not seen anything in the requested budget, so we don't know what they're going to request for this year.
Just real brief, I will say I did get a chance to sit with Chief Morris. She is a proponent on body cams, but like anything else with unfunded mandates, obviously there's other expenses. What I would like to see is, and maybe it's something that you guys could look at, is what about a body cam committee? Obviously we can't make money just appear, but let's at least do the research and figure out and say, you know what? It would cost this agency $75,000, federal grants. How can we go about this? So if nothing else, even if we can't propose it, because obviously there's other mandates, I'm sure, and there's other things that they need at the police department. But let's at least get their talks, because these body cams have been around for about 10 years now. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other public input? Cindy? Okay. Let's move on to staff matters. Ken, you want to give us an update on the fiscal 18 budget, please?
It's going to be very sketchy. We're still working on it. You saw in the paper where the ad valorem tax total for the city increased by almost 11%. Well, I'm not sure if they said 10%, but anyway, it's almost 11%. That really doesn't give us the information at this point that we need. We need to know how much of that was additions to the tax roll and how much was reassessments before we can speak to what the rollback rate would be. I can tell you that in our number crunching, we are using the same revenues as we had budgeted for ad valorem taxes this year. That's our starting point. We've met with all the departments after today's meetings. We don't quite have it balanced. We are probably within striking distance, I believe, between what we already told them we would cut and we're taking a second look at some of their accounts now and saying, even though we kind of passed on the first round, let's take another look at it. I mean, we're going through the process, in other words. We are, I think, on schedule to give a budget packet to each member of the budget committee. We'll pass the capital program portion of that onto the Planning and Zoning Board because they are required to do a review of capital items. I think the packet will go out on June 12th, which is next Monday, but it's going to be tight. So if it slips a day, don't bug me with phone calls because I'll be busy trying to get it as soon as possible.
That means we'll have that before our next meeting?
Most certainly, yes.
Because our next meeting's on the 19th, right? 14
Yes.
days from now, 2 weeks from today?
And that's kind of why I set the June 12th date to deliver a packet to you so you'd have time to kind of look at the materials. My plan would be to do, as I've done in past years, is to have a PowerPoint presentation kind of hitting the highlights of what's being recommended. Other than that, I don't have much to add. I know some question came up before about, well, street work, we spent quite a bit of money this year. I'm thinking our numbers right now are around about $450,000 more this coming year for streets that we've examined and say these need to be acted on as soon as next year. I haven't seen any numbers in the projected street work that tell me that we can't afford to cover those numbers solely out of local option gas tax. Now, some of you may remember when we increased the millage to the 3.5 that, was it 100,000? We've been supplementing the gas tax monies with general fund money because of that millage increase. So I'm thinking that we can perhaps discontinue that transfer, which is a positive. And basically, there's going to be some other shuffling and suggestions that I have to continue our goal to get funds that are designated for a certain purpose, used for that purpose. Gas tax included, CRA funds included. Try to make sure we're sticking to the regulations that we have on the use of those monies and not skewing the deck some, so to speak. Any particular questions or any concerns about the way we might be heading or direction you want us to take?
Just wait till we get the packet and look it over. That should give us a week before the next meeting.
Yes.
Within that. Okay, thanks for the update, Ken.
And that won't be your last shot, you understand. And if you need additional meetings other than what's already been scheduled, we can accommodate that as well. So.
Okay. We're down to committee member matters. We will start at the right end this time. Mr. Michael.
I've got nothing until those numbers come through next time around.
Thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, I have nothing else right now.
Thank you. Ed?
I was just looking at the calendar. We meet on the 19th, and we may have to meet again. You never know. Depends on where this budget goes. So our next meeting is July 10th, and that's where we put together our presentation to the city council, and that's where we do a little PowerPoint, if everybody agrees on it. So what I thought I'd do is, we discussed the last time, I'll take last year's PowerPoint, update it to this year, once we see the budget. And I guess, let's see, no, we go approve that on the 10th of July, and that goes to the city council on the 12th of July. Okay? So we'll get that thing started. I'll get that thing started, and I may bring in the preliminary thing for discussion purposes on June 19th, so we can all look at it. And
I believe the committee has already approved that to be done.
right, but
Yes,
that's, the doing is
Right.
what's in it.
Right.
You got to approve.
yes.
You got to approve the numbers and the whole thing.
That may be a little early to look at the revenues, because like Ken said, you're not going to know actually what the rollback rate's going to calculate to. You may know that by July 10th meeting, but you're not going to know it by that middle June meeting.
Last year, I just looked it up today, it was like,
June 26th, I think Dave Nolte put that out.
actually the 22nd last year.
22nd. So he may put it out early again this year.
Hope so.
So once we get it, I'll get that from Ken, I can put it in, and we'll see it on the 10th of
Right.
July.
Very good. Andrea?
Nothing, thank you.
Sergio? Harry?
Always. Always. Got to have something to talk about. Just a few things. Ken, on the capital improvement and budget packet that you'll be putting out, can you give me a little idea how, or what type of form that would take? Is it a full-blown draft, or is it just several pages of summaries, or? Just for informational purposes, I'm just curious what format that might take.
I think you'll be burdened with all the paperwork.
Well, that's fine. I
Because,
like
I mean,
detail too,
we
but
do
I didn't
have
know-
like details on each, if you've seen our previous presentation, we present a little blurb on each project saying where the funding's coming from, kind of why it's needed, although we can work on better descriptions in some of these areas, but
So you'll have
we give you a little blurb on each one, then we bring it into summary pages that show you each funded year, what items are funded and where the funds are coming from. I mean, you get ample information about what we've got in the numbers.
And that'll be on the approximately June the 12th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be part of that original, I mean, I basically have a draft of it now. We're still working on refining what's in and what's out.
Do you ever put a supplement or a page in there saying, here's what would like to have, and if funding were to come in better, here's some alternate items that we'd like to possibly be considered if funding is positive?
I don't normally add such a list. We've been pretty successful in funding everything that we really, in our hearts, felt like this is something we really needed to proceed on. I mean, we try to present from staff's perspective and the city manager's recommended budget, these are things that are doable, and these are, we've picked from possible priorities on how to go about doing them.
Absolutely, but I was just wondering if
We
you
don't
have-
really give a wish list.
Okay, I didn't want to use that term, but that sometimes
one
it's
signal you might-
beneficial if you have the absolute must-haves covered, and then if the things that would be beneficial in the long run, if funding were available.
And we-
But we don't get to see that, is what you're saying.
Well, we do indirectly, if you kind of watch our methods. Everything that we know that's on the table, we address. So if we don't feel, well, maybe this, it's too soon to fund, or we can't afford it yet, then you'll see on those future years of the capital program,
Okay.
things that have kind of been pushed back, that some may say, well, this should be more of a priority, and maybe something else that is funded shouldn't be. I mean, those are the kind of decisions we'd get input from you guys and the city council.
And could you give us an update on the progress of the pickleball court? Are we doing 4 or 8 courts, or?
I'm not really up to date on the situation there. I know the bids came in higher than we anticipated, and they were in the process of reworking it, but I haven't been a part of those discussions at this point.
And for the board here, I was just wondering if anyone had heard anything about the Bark Park. There are several citizens that are wanting us to consider items to be addressed in the budget or to taken care of out of this current budget if possible.
I assume that would come through the rec committee, right? They wanted something in one of the parks additionally. Doesn't the Parks and Recs Committee handle those recommendations to the council?
To some extent, and of course, city manager's office.
There was a large contingency, fairly large for this audience, at the Parks Committee meeting, but they didn't have a quorum, so they couldn't really act on it. So, and I didn't see anyone show up, not even one, for the next day. Could have been the weather for the city council meeting, but it is something that a lot of people have come to me over, and what they're doing is they're complaining right now that the chairs had been taken away and the dog bowls, and now the angrier they get about it, not being able to have a place to sit and all, they're making all these demands that the city considered putting in awnings and all of these large dollar items. And what I'd like to see is if we could consider a small dollar outlay, probably $200 or less, of some stackable chairs and a couple dog bowls, property of the city of Sebastian on it, and make this matter go away. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at people sitting here continuing to come and ask for big-ticketed items there. Granted, some of them may be needed, but maybe down the road. But I was wondering if we could consider that small expenditure and take care of a lot of people. I mean, we're going to spend hundreds of thousands on pickleball courts, which I think we do need. A few chairs. I know I've heard that the chairs would be a liability in a storm. Look at all the storms we've had. We've never heard of anybody being hit by a lawn chair, And the benches, there are some benches in the Bark Park, but every single one of them is sitting out in the sun. I wouldn't sit there myself. Some portable chairs, little stackables that they can stick under one of the trees like they have been doing since the Bark Park has opened, would go a long way into satisfying a lot of our citizens.
I'm kind of confident the city manager's listening in and will hear your comments. And I know he's had some other calls and complaints kind of thing coming into his office, but you are talking about a minor expense that probably would be out of the current year budget and just be buried into the operating cost, for those kind of items. The other option you spoke about is major capital items, and if if we're supposed to jump that way, then of course we need to get that into the works, and at this point, it's not in the works.
Those are the things I was hoping we could avoid having to deal with. And the last, no, another thing. The body cams. I know that's something that maybe we could bring up the board if they so wished, once we get the packet, to see what's on the list and what has been certified by the tax collector as to whether or not it's something that we might want to propose, even if it were just a pilot program. And the last thing I have is, can we get a status or update on the traffic at Barber Joy Haven intersection? I think Mr., how do you pronounce his name, Watatambi?
Watanabe, when he gave the report before, I think it was pretty much, he was at a dead end at that point in time, but he was going to continue trying, but I haven't heard any update. But I can communicate with him and see if we can't get either, well, some kind of report back to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Every time I go by that intersection, I just worry about a liability for the city. And that's all I've got.
Okay, I just have, my only question concerns the capital projects status report. Do we have an official process to close a project once it's started? Or if there's money left over, does it hang out there forever? I'm specifically speaking of the presidential streets. That's a fiscal 2012 project, and it still has a remaining $35,200 in it. Why don't we close that out and put it to death? What are we doing on the presidential streets?
It's in a monitoring phase. So we actually have to do like test wells and so forth, that there's no impact on the drainage. It aggravates us as well. We've got another one, in addition to the presidential streets, that we...
Yeah, but wouldn't that be picked up by operating cost out of the gas tax fund or the public works budget? What would that be doing in the capital projects fund?
Well, because it's funded out of monies that are supposed to be used just for capital items, so we're reluctant to just, like you say, if we closed out the project, and closed it out of probably DST funds in that case, or I think...
I'm assuming it designates that a grant was involved in that. I'm assuming the grant portion was already spent, closed out, and finished.
Yes.
Yeah, otherwise you'd have issues. And then I assume on the Main Street access roads for fiscal 13, it's got about the same amount of money hanging out there? Is
That's
that
the other one
same?
I was thinking about, where there's a monitoring.
Yeah.
But although I think that'll be kind of off the books real soon on the Main Street, but the other one, I think we've got another year of...
Okay. And then the other one in fiscal 14, we've got DST and grant-funded airport hangars, and we still have $66,000 hanging out there. And then there's a Tulip Drive for another $35,000. I'm assuming those are the same things. That's in the fiscal 14 part, those two items in the fiscal 14.
The airport hangar is Hangar C, which has just been completed. That's probably going to fall off this next quarter
Okay.
on that particular one.
And I'm assuming Tulip Drive is going to be similar to the other two street projects.
I think that's the correct assumption as well.
That was all I had. I just wondered if there was some way we could close those things out and get rid of them.
I'll put some thought in how that might be handled. I mean, we may be able to we could get it off the list anyway and just kind of reserve those funds in some way within the fund that they were.
Well, you could reallocate the funds anywhere, anywhere they wanted to. If there was like that money that's left over, you could reallocate it someplace else and use it, right?
For something that's eligible.
Yeah,
Under that,
right.
yeah, under that source of revenue.
And I assume if it's CRA money or DST money, it could be used for just about anything that the council wanted to use it for. That met the definition of discretionary sales tax and CRA funds.
If it met the definition, sure.
Yeah. Well, that was really all I had. Topics for the next meeting. As far as I'm concerned, I kind of like this format you have here now. It's easy to use, and I assume you'll add something in for the actual budget that will be on the next meeting. We'll have something to note that. So I can't think of anything else we'd need to add. Does any other member have something they'd like to see on the agenda?
Can we pick up a copy before the meeting of the CIP budget?
I'd imagine it'll be in the packet.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll come to you as one big notebook.
Yeah. Okay. The next meeting date is set for June the 19th. Is anything else for the good of the order from any member of the meeting? Yeah. We stand adjourned.